Well, folks, it's time to kick it old school. So you can feel cool. Give it to me, baby. Baby. Yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of the Gen X Comic Show. As you saw it in the intro. That's a little bit of a teaser. I've got an amazing guest and one of my heroes. So I'm looking forward to asking him a few questions. Again, I'm your host, Gen X, and this episode is one of my favorite creators of all time, making his first appearance on the show. And we are grateful for this creative and his contributions to the industry. And I cannot express how awesome this is as a fan. So this YouTube channel is a labor of love and was born out of the depths of the pandemic. And I strive to live the dream of meeting my heroes and heroes at cons and through this platform. And it is important for me as a content creator to highlight the people first and jump into the why of their work. So before we start, please follow all the guests on the socials and follow, like, and subscribe on YouTube and Instagram. We'll be throwing a whole bunch of stuff at you. Just have a pen and paper ready, or maybe you're in front of a computer. Take notation. So this is going to be a great show. Again, YouTube and Instagram at GenX_comics. That's GenX_comics. And my website will be revamped very soon at www.genxcomics.net, not .com, but .net, where I'll be providing news on my virtual cons and amazing content. So here we go. Michael Avon Oeming is a comic book artist and writer known for creating the Eisner-award-winning book Powers with Brian Michael Bendis, a crime noir series involving superpowered characters. He worked with James Tynion the fourth on Blue Book, a nonfiction comic about UFO encounters published by Dark Horse Comics. Oeming also co-wrote the Ragnarok arc in Marvel's Thor, detailing the end of Asgard. Oh, no, not the end of Asgard. Mike began his comics career at age 14, breaking in as an inker. Growing up in a small town, Mike found tutelage under Neil Volkes and Adam Hughes, while corresponding with Nexus creators Steve Rude and Mike Barron, which I also have copies of those as well. After years working in indie press, his first big break was as an inker on Daredevil, and shortly after as penciler inker on DC's version of Judge Dredd. Then Foot Soldiers at Dark Horse Comics during the mid-90s. Comics crash, Mike moved back into indie comics, starting on his path of creator-owned comics with the Ship of Fools, co-created with Brian J.L. Glass. While drawing Ship of Fools, Mike continued with other work such as inking Neil Volkes on Ninjak and drawing Bulletproof Monk, which later became a John Woo film, which you all probably have seen. So Mike experimented with a new, simpler style of drawing and began developing several projects, including the Mice Templar, Hammer of Gods, Quixote, and what would become Powers with Brian Michael Bendis. Powers has been nominated for a Harvey Award and won an Eisner Award for the best new series. And Mike has since tackled other projects, including Hammer of Gods, Parliament of Justice, Hellboy, so on and so forth. He is an amazing creative. I have the privilege and honor of bringing him into the stream, and I'm looking forward to meeting and interviewing one of my heroes. Again, everybody, give him a round of applause as he comes into the stream. Michael Avon Oeming, how are you?
How's it going, man? Thanks for having me.
Being in person, isn't it?
Yeah.
All the bells and whistles. Hopefully this will come out, maybe we'll have a comic book show on TV at some point. Bring those back. I miss those.
Yeah. I loved watching those back in the day. My favorite one right now is there's I'm really bad with names. There's a manga artist. He started the series, the Men documentaries, where he has other comic book creators on, and he'll set up all these cameras, and they'll work on pages, and then afterwards, like a sports breakdown, he sits with them and asks, "Why did you make this choice? Why are you using this pen?" It's fantastic.
Oh, that's it. That's amazing.
Yeah,
that's cool. Oh my gosh, bring it back. We need to bring back that type of entertainment for us geeks that love everything comic books or even just manga, anime. I miss watching when I guess this is kind of telling my age, Akira, stuff like that. And Ninja Scroll was one of my favorite manga series and anime. So I wish they would.
Akira messed me up because that was really my first anime, and like so nothing else. Everything else I saw was like, even if it was almost as good, like Ghost in the Shell, it's kind of like almost, you know.
Yeah.
it really ruined my entryway into those.
And that movie was what, 3 hours and a half long. That those movies were a true investment. So
Yeah.
kudos.
Watching documentaries about how that was made is mind blowing. You know, the
Wow.
white brush doing every little light in those buildings and stuff.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. Well, I wanted to thank you personally. This is such a huge treat. I know we've been trying to connect for a minute, and you've been gracious enough to keep me honest and make sure that we get this done. So again, like I said, without fanboying too much, you've been really one of the most amazing artists and creatives that I've been following for quite a long time. So,
Thank you.
but
When
yeah,
I first saw one of your, clips of one of your interviews on TikTok, one of the reasons why I was like, "Hey, this is really nice," I was hoping you would ask me because I could see you had skills as an interviewer, and that's always a pleasure to be able to have a really good conversation with somebody who knows what they're doing. So,
thank you.
I'm yours now.
I'm gonna walk around the badge. I'm gonna have a badge that says I'm gonna say definitely sponsored and an official interviewer extraordinaire at every
Awesome.
con I go
Absolutely.
to. And I'm going to say that you are the one that stamped that approval, so that'll be a good thing for me. So I could talk about all your accomplishments all day, but like I said before, my big thing, especially interviewing, I like to get to know folks as who they were when they were coming up in as a kid, thinking about what were some milestones in your life. And so just wanted to, I guess, get us started just to talk about where you're from, where you're at. Like, tell us about yourself, your origin story, any
Sure.
background, upbringing, and like your influences, really.
I do have a kind of an origin story. Growing up in this really small town called Bordentown in New Jersey. It's a small colonial kind of town. It's just me and my mom. She drew a lot, so I was always kind of drawing. Always had a little bit of talent in it. Always interested in it. And then, like there was a couple of times we moved to live with some other family down in Texas. And when I moved the second time in the 6th grade or 5th grade, I didn't adjust well. Like I don't know how, but somehow as like a 10-year-old, I had northern snobbery or some sort, right? So like I just couldn't assimilate. Even though I was born in Texas, I don't know, I had an attitude about me, and I just receded from everything and everybody. And at some point down there, I got my hands on some comics, and I was tracing. I think I was originally like sort of tracing out of like Dungeons and Dragons manuals or something. And I just started tracing these comics, and I was really interested in it. And then we moved back to New Jersey, and when we moved back, shortly after we moved back, I found a copy at a 7-Eleven of X-Men Annual 9, which was the Chris Claremont, Art Adams, and Mike Mignola, who's one of my other big influences, well, the biggest influence, and Terry Austin. They inked this one issue where the X-Men go to Asgard, and that just blew my mind. Like, the art was different than everything else I had seen before. That was when I realized, like, all this kind of tracing and stuff that I was doing is like, oh, this is what I want to do. And I didn't know what an inker was. I didn't understand why all these different names were on there. Warlock, who was like he's like a broken pile of magnets. Like, I didn't understand what was going on, like why
Machinery.
he was, but I was just in love with it. I studied the crap out of that book, and shortly after, finding the first comic book store that was not too far, it was like one town over. And that's where it got X-Men or New Mutants Annual 2. And these are the only books I can like name the issues of, right? This was the follow-up. It was Art Adams, inked by Terry Austin. And again, this is the second part of them in Asgard. So these two books formulated a lot for me, right? So that first there was that sort of like, I don't have friends. Like a lot of people locking yourself up with your comics. Then having my mind blown by Art Adams. And for years, I just wanted to be Art Adams. In my early art, I'm just trying to draw like Art Adams. And it's ironic that Mignola is in there because he really became my sort of North Star, even early on, way before Hellboy. Because when I was first reading comics, a lot of books looked the same. I was stuck getting Marvel for whatever reason. I wasn't looking too much at DC. And at that point, Marvel had kind of recycled the Marvel house style so many times that even with the quality of that stuff, it all felt the same to a kid,
Mhm.
right? And then here comes these few different people. There was like Art Adams, Mike Mignola, Rick Leonardi, early Mark Silvestri,
Yep.
these people who they were just standing out style wise, and that stuff always drew my attention. Um, so I was always kind of on the outside of what the mainstream was, even when I was digesting all that stuff. But I just became obsessed at that age, and I'd say between starting around 12, like all I did was comics. Even early on in high school, like I quit my sports. I quit doing sports to concentrate just on drawing. I found a very small community there in New Jersey. The one town over, Adam Hughes lived. And so I met Adam when he was working in a comic book store, like drawing like Wolverine claws on like backing boards.
What?
Yeah, that this pile is like on sale this week. So this is
That's
before
cool.
he had gotten any work or anything. So we became pals, and he became a mentor along with Neil Vokes, who I met through Adam.
Yeah.
Um, and knowing a couple of these guys who either were breaking in or already broken in, they were sort of my school and how I learned things. And I just stayed focused to the point where I was sending out work to get like feedback from editors, and I would send them to all the different companies. And this one company, Innovation, liked my inks and wanted to hire me. I
That's
don't
so
think they knew
cool.
that I was 14. I didn't know what an actual job offer was. I didn't know that I should follow that job offer up with other stuff or whatever, because I was in school and whatnot. But then I was so focused on this one thing, everything else fell behind because of it. My schoolwork. I eventually got kicked out of school
Okay.
because I was cutting school so much, either by staying up late and like I figured out, oh, if you come in before 12 o'clock, it counts as a full day. You're just late, right? But eventually, I did that too many times, and they were like, they wanted to hold me back, even though I was passing my grades.
Yeah.
So I gave myself a year. I was like, well, I'll give myself the rest of this year. It was at the end of my sophomore year. I'll either break in and get paying work, or I'll just suck it up and go back, right?
Yeah.
But I got some paying work, and I went to go get my GED. But honestly, I was in remedial math all my life. So then when you get your GED math, it is a different math than remedial
Yep.
math. And I was
Yep.
like, I'm not going to learn this. So it's a good thing that comics worked out. Otherwise, I'd be digging ditches. If there's anything wrong with digging ditches.
There's nothing wrong with digging ditches, y'all. That'll be the next book.
That's my retirement plan.
Yeah. So you started at 14, just and by whim, just literally people were like, saw your talent back then. And it's awesome that you knew exactly what you wanted to do at that early of an age.
Feel so blessed. I feel so
Yeah.
blessed about that. There's a lot of people that didn't figure out that they want to do comics enough later or find their passion until later, you know. And I figured it out very early on. I was lucky to have some people around me to guide me the right way of like, well, how do you get into comics and what are these different jobs and what is the paper like and all this stuff? Because remember, back in the day, there was no internet, right?
Yeah.
So like you didn't know how any of this stuff was done. So I was lucky to have some insight, and yeah, and that kept me focused. And my whole life since then has just really been centered on this, which is
Wow.
sad because you think I'd be a much better artist than I
What?
am.
Okay. All right, you definitely underselling yourself. No, but in all seriousness, I think it's amazing. Like you just talked about all these influences and people that you just cross paths that became also a part of the iconic ways of, I also connect with you on like you're not of the norm and you like the things that are eye-catching and much more in depth that have more of, when I think about even Mignola, like that is a different style. I think about your work, it's a whole new different style. Looking back at your earlier work and now to your current work and how it's morphed and how you can go back and forth is amazing to me. And so I just I love that. Now I will have to ask you, what did your parents think about your movement in and out of
Oh,
school and your projection?
so I also grew up pretty poor. Like that was one of the reasons why we were moving. Like we needed places to stay. Sometimes we are just sleeping on other family members like dens and stuff. It was just me and my mom.
Yeah.
So they were just happy I wasn't a criminal. you know, the bar was low. The bar was low, and like they were just all excited that I had something I was focused on. I wasn't running around the streets. I wasn't doing drugs or going to parties or any of the normal stuff that you're supposed to do as a kid. I didn't do any of that. I was just 24/7 doing the comics and stuff. So, and then the fact that like, early on during that high school period, the work was paying, back then it was like $30 a page for inks. Now, that sounds like nothing, but this was 1989, something like that. I had no overhead or whatever, so it was actual money at the time. So yeah, I think the education would have been helpful, or the GED would have been helpful, but the secret is nobody ever checks any of that stuff. So like when I did have to go get a real job at one point, I was like, shit, I've got nothing, right? But no, the fact is like nobody checks what high school you went to, or if you whatever. So but that was I mean that's a whole mixed bag of a whole bunch of other stuff, but basically, the low expectations of being poor means that if you have something you're interested in, there's not a lot, you should have a plan B.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you do this.
That's amazing. I mean, I think what you're speaking of is resiliency, and you're right. I think some of the planets have to align in some ways, and even good fortune, and I think when I think about you and that story and your trajectory, it's just amazing how all those things worked out. And not that you didn't have struggles, but they were
100%. Like I tell people all the time, like success, even like power success is a huge part of it is the timing, right? And it's the market, right? It's not Brian's genius or my abilities. Like those things help, but you need so much more than just talent to get by. There's a lot of gatekeeping. There's a lot of circumstances. There's a lot of like just wild circumstances that don't have like an agenda attached to it, right? That's just timing and stuff. I was lucky I was in an area where there was a handful of other artists, right, who could show me, because without that, I don't know, I think I still would have been on the same path, but it wouldn't have been the same path.
Yeah. I was going to use this at the end, but I really do think one of the things that you put a post up on TikTok that actually hit me harder than I thought it would. It was literally like, I know you've been really active and showing folks like, your inking and your style and your drawings, but you said something about you were very reflective about life. And this conversation is leading me to kind of tap into that conversation again. And I just wanted to say I appreciate that, because it also puts a kind of like a reset that we should all have about what we love to do, the people we hang out with, the folks that we choose to be around, and really the vitality of life. You talked about that in your post. So I just wanted to tell you, like, if I didn't get the opportunity in this interview, like that actually was a really connector to everything that I've seen you do. But then it also gave me a layer. And now this story and what you told me has really, cemented a lot of what I think about you as a person. I've seen your other interviews as well. I've seen your work as well. But that post really hit me. And so when I think about what you're talking and speaking of is that we all come from different places. We need to support each other. And this is one life to live, really, to do the best that you can. So that's a really cool post. If anybody hasn't seen it, it's on TikTok. Make sure you go there. But it really is a powerful message that you put out there. And I wasn't sure if you were trying to be Zen-like, but it definitely hit me harder than I thought it would. So,
like I've had a lot of time to self-reflect, some therapy has helped that in the past. But just I've been lucky to have a lot of influences that were really positive around me. One of the positive influences, like I mean, you ever look at other people's circle of friends and like they're ball busting and stuff, and there's just like a certain amount of like competition, and you're kind of just going like, that's weird, man. Like, why aren't you guys just supporting each other instead of,
Yeah.
and in the comics industry, there's just a lot of weirdness, and sometimes like Brian and I will talk about it, and we're just thankful that all of our friends are, people that aren't necessarily like-minded, but we're all supportive of each other's successes, and we're there for each other when we need it to be and stuff. And not everybody has that, and I think sometimes that kind of community can develop around you without you realizing it.
Mhm.
And I see that on social media all the time. There's a few artists on TikTok I often like, but they're constantly sort of arguing with people, and I'm like,
Yeah.
about like art styles or like what you should do or not do as artists and stuff. And I'm just like, okay. Yeah. But one of the things that happened along my journey is that I kind of lost my career, for all this like super focus that I have.
Mhm.
There was that time period in the mid 90s. There was the speculation market collapse.
Yep.
And I went from being 14 to climbing the ladder all the way you're supposed to do and doing indie comics, getting interviews at Marvel and DC, and slowly getting your way in through there and stuff. And at one point, I'm drawing Judge Dredd for
Mhm.
DC, and I'm like 20, and going through Judge Dredd, and then working on Foot Soldiers at Dark Horse with Jim Kruger, and doing all the things you're supposed to do for things to go forward. And then the market collapses, and I can't get work anymore. And literally everything I was working for disappeared.
Wow.
And I had a son at that point. Well, I still have a son, but he was born when I was like 23. So for the first time ever, I had to go and find a regular job, like a real job. And the
Wow.
reality came around to me that I was like, oh, maybe everything that I wanted to do it's gone.
Mm.
Like, I'm not going to be able to be a comic book creator. But I decided I was still going to be a comic book creator. I was like, well, even if I'm doing like books through slave labor or Caliber or something, black and white, like a book a year, whatever it
Mhm.
is, I'm still going to make comics, or I'll still make them for myself, and that lasted about a year. And it was really hard, but it was also like the best thing ever could have happened to me, because at that time I was trying to get work by figuring out what did editors want, what did house styles were quote hot at the time, what did publishers want, right? And I wasn't drawing for myself or creating for myself or even thinking what kind of comics I wanted to make.
Yeah.
So in kind of losing everything and having to take a step back, I was able to rebuild everything. That's when I met Brian. That's when I kind of changed my style up. I changed my style because I didn't have the time to draw all the line work that I wanted to do, being Art Adams or Mike Golden and Kevin Nolan, right? Like, that wasn't going to work out if I have a job and a kid, I'll never get a book done that way.
Wow.
And that's when I kind of refocused everything. So that kind of thing, I tried to hold on to, even though that happened a very long time ago. So before Powers. So I'm reminded of that all the time. And then, recently, just society with all the different changes that we've been having and the upheaval, it's a constant reminder that everything you have can go away.
Mm. Why don't we jump into Powers? We
And
talked about Powers. For folks who don't know what Powers is and has been living under a rock, talk about the seminal title. And I know that you've gotten a lot of accolades, and hopefully, and you've gotten a whole TV show through PlayStation and some other things. Can you tell me about the origin of that idea between you and Brian Michael Bendis? And when you created, did you think it would be this like big?
yeah. So the concept of Powers is that it is a cop procedural. It's about police. It's a noir cop detective story that these cops are investigating superhero murders. So it's kind of a ground up look at superheroes. Sort of reversing the way that we look at superheroes, and specifically kind of learning like who they really are behind these images. And at the time, it was very influenced by VH1's Behind the Music. Um, a bit of Marvel's was a big part of it. That ground view up at superheroes was a big influence. Um, Brian cut his teeth doing noir comics. There was Jinx, aka Goldfish. I had met him around this time at a store signing. It was him and David Mack were there. Those two are already super close friends, but the three of us clicked immediately. We knew we wanted to work together immediately. David Mack and I went to this after party where he gave me a black eye because we were young, and so when you're a young dude, often it comes out in these physical ways, and we start talking about how we wrestle, right? So like all the cool people are inside drinking beer and smoking weed, and we're out in the backyard in the dark, like wrestling and stuff, right?
WWF back then.
Yeah, and for years we would just wrestle whenever we were together, and it was pretty ridiculous. But yeah, I started faxing them. This is back in the 90s, right? So it was faxing. So I would fax them as character sketches. But in the style that I was trying out, the way that the Power style developed was, as I was looking for other work, one of the jobs I was trying to get on was the Batman Adventures books. So I had a whole series of these Adventures books, right? And what I found was when I was doing this stripped down style, all my work just became more powerful and stronger. Ironically, I could never really do the model. I couldn't stay on model close enough to get any of those jobs. Despite when you look at the early Power stuff, you see how much it's influenced by that. But luckily, that also meant that there was something original to it. It wasn't just a carbon copy of all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I started sending them versions of my characters. Brian writes back to me one of these days, I've got an idea for something we can do. And it's called Powers, and there's superheroes. And I was like, no. There's superheroes in it. I want to do what you're doing. I want to do like AKA Goldfish and Jinx and Torso, right? He's like, no. The superheroes are a small part of this, right? So we started working on it together. Image was just opening up the doors to everybody to do all these other books. And we expected to last. Well, we went crazy. We were like, let's do it in color, which meant we were going to be canceled really soon. So we figured we'd have like 4 issues of color, and then we'd either have to go to black and white or we'd just be canceled. But that's just kind of how comics were then and kind of are now. So we just took that chance. And at this time, I'm working at this real job that I told you about. I was a security guard at like a car dealership. So I had like a little booth, and I'd sit in a booth and draw all night. So like the first 4 issues of Powers were drawn in this booth for the most part.
Whoa.
Yeah. And lo and behold, by the 3rd issue, our numbers started to go up. And we talk about the timing of success, right? So this was a time where we're kind of coming out of that 90s thing of like all this very surfacey superhero artist first stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here comes something where the commentary isn't about how many pouches and how many guns and how many windows you can jump through, or how many levels of hell and blood that you have in your name or your face or whatever it is. And really looking at what are superheroes and what are these stories that we're telling ourselves. This is all Brian's writing, right? And it's the timing of that time period is a huge part of why Powers was a success. So it took off, and that was the beginning of a whole new chapter and a friendship. Brian and I are very, very close friends, just extended family at this point. And it's 25 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It flies by so fast. That is amazing. 25 years working together and knowing each other. That's really cool.
Yeah.
When I think about Powers, I think about the influences, but I feel like you were right. It's the timing in the middle. You were literally, when I think what grabbed you the most was, as you just alluded, Brian was talking about that it's not that the heroes aren't like the primary. It's actually about the folks around them and how society is reacting to them and their murders, right? And then not to give it away, but certain cops are former heroes and have powers. And then some cops or partners end up getting powers and things like that. So it's really kind of like a very new take. And so when I think about even the stuff that's being produced now, they pay homage to you and the work that you all laid the foundation for. So thinking about stuff like the Invincibles and all the other things that are coming out on Prime and so on and so forth, like this is exactly what people it's a, sort of a time machine almost too. And you think
Yeah.
about like what we were looking for, we would think about darkness, but then like, we had the, like you said, the Batman animated series, right? And so
Yeah.
those are things that were dark, but not too far in. And so to see
Yeah. I mean,
powers do that.
often like people will forget, like even in these darker things, like Dark Knight had humor in it,
Yeah.
so it wasn't all blood and guts spewing out of your teeth and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Watchmen had funny points in it, um, and then Powers is really funny, and that was one of the hard problems we had when we were doing a lot of adaptations, where we had a bunch of different film options. There was a television series and stuff, and like getting people to understand, like when you watch like Breaking Bad, it is a funny show. The
Yeah.
Sopranos is a funny show. They're not comedies, but they find real humor to balance all that stuff out. And that was always one of the strengths of Powers was, well, Dina. Dina was a smartass, right? Like, so
Yep.
she's one who had all the funny lines and stuff. And then we got to see her darkness. And one of the great things about having a book that was around that long was we started out with certain rules. And then at a certain point, we were ready to jump over those rules to do other things. So we went through the gambit of like starting out the ground level. At a certain point, we get cosmic. At another point, we got ancient.
Yep.
And then we kind of mixed it all together. And then it all culminates, 20 years later at Dark Horse Comics with the last Powers graphic novel, which wrapped up the whole story and stuff.
So you just laid the blueprint foundation, even the story of Powers and how you moved from publisher to publisher. What was that like? I always wanted to ask you that question about, did you change anything because it was creator owned? Did you have any like freedom, or were there some things that you had to kind of like compromise on?
No real compromises. I'm laughing because early in Powers, there's lots of blood and guts and nudity, right? And I'm a strong believer in there's a time and place for everything. It sort of depends on your book and depends on your story, right? But we could get kind of extreme sometimes. We had total freedom at Image. When we went to Marvel, the only thing was that there was just less penis involved. Because like if somebody was naked, they're going to be naked, know. But I think that was the only thing that Marvel asked us to like pump the brakes on a little bit, or just be more suggestive or something, And even then, it wasn't like some hard rule or something, It was just, they were just asking us.
Yeah.
But we've always been lucky to be. We own everything. We've never lost any of our rights. We have a great lawyer who we've been with since the very beginning of all this. Brian and I have never sued each other, not even close.
Please, let's not do a Hall of Notes here. Let's not do a Hall of Notes.
I'm a big Hall of Notes fan because I'm old. And I'm often like, did they hate each other the whole time?
I think so.
I'm kind of hearing that now. Like, they never really got along.
Yeah.
And then at a certain point, they hated each other. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I'm glad that wasn't your situation.
No, but you hear about it in comics all the time, and it's sad. It's sad to watch, and it's frustrating, and I can't imagine it. It's painful.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We've always kept our rights. We've kept good with each other. Worked with other good people. Had people behind the scenes looking out for us. Brian's wife is always looking out for us. Like, she's very good with the contracts as well. They've helped me build something out of my life because the only skill I had was comics, right? But then when Powers happened and stuff, they helped me figure out like what to do with that.
That's cool.
Just because things come and go so easily, and we also always knew that Powers wasn't going to last forever, so we're always preparing for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just got off in a ramble.
No. That's amazing. It goes back to that community conversation, right? And who you can, folks want to break into the business, be about the business, be in the spotlight. But then what happens when you're there, right? You all won awards and you got notoriety, and there was a lot going on. I'm sure people were pulling and tugging at you to do other projects. And then you had to be like, all right, my small court is this group of people here that we wrestle and punch each other in the eye and we do great work together. So I'm of that mind as well. I love the fact that I see a lot of you all creatives specifically, y'all have like a core group of people that you rely and support. And I'm always crossing my fingers saying, I hope their relationships are that fun.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, at
It's
least
pretty
in my
cool.
circles and even the circles sort of tangentially around me, and I can see who's being supported, and I'm really happy for that. Because comics is, if you're a comic creator, you spend a lot of time in your own head, alone. Even if you have like family around you and stuff like that, it's still like just hours at the table, and it will mess you up.
Yeah.
And it can make you difficult, and I get it, so it hurts when I see some other professionals sort of focusing on the wrong things and stuff. And then some of it maybe it's just I can be judgy, right? So like
Yeah.
to me, it's all about the work. I'm just not attracted to the rest of it, to the point, like I really dislike I was just having a conversation with Shelley Bond is in town. She's an editor, legendary editor, and we're talking about that parenthetical relationship that readers can have to creators and creators can have to readers, and that I don't think it's really healthy, and I wish we could start having more conversations about that in the industry, about like the stardom thing. Yeah, that relation or ownership that either the creators think that they have over their readers or fans. I like to say readers. I don't even like to say fans.
Hmm.
Even that's weird to me, because we're just all people, you know. And I think the work is so important, and like the more you can focus on the work, the more successful I think you can be, the more happy you can be. The ladder climbing and all of the rest of that stuff. It's just messy and it's a distraction. But that could just be me because I'm very neurotic and I'm always self-checking and stuff like that. So maybe if I wasn't so neurotic and anxiety filled, like that stuff wouldn't bother me and I'd be happy to embrace it. But I'm not. So
Yeah, and I think it also lends itself to say, you started very young, and at 14, kind of learning the business, seeing probably some amazing, great things happen, and some things not so much, to be able to, ascertain what trajectory, what angle you're going to come at it from your own career. And you've been, I'm thankful for that. That's an amazing thing. I think a lot of people, like you said, ladder climb or are looking for that spotlight or being the it person after years and years of toil and
yeah,
hurt, pain, right? And
because
then you
all
get
that stuff
there.
goes away so
Yeah.
easy. So you can put a lot of time and effort into it, and it's just going to go away. Whereas if you just like naturally let things take its course, I think you're going to be much healthier and happier and stuff. Like there are a lot of creators I know who, and I see a lot of this online, that are very good at what they do. They don't have much of a career,
Hmm.
but they're okay with that.
Yeah.
Because they have some other stability in their life. They're not trying to ladder climb. They're just trying to express themselves. TikTok is where I found you. I find a lot of this, and it was one of the things that I love most about it. I'd be looking at these people making their own books. They're selling it through the TikTok store.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're only doing like 300 copies, which is kind of like a Kickstarter. Like a lot of my Kickstarters only do like 300 copies, or they're doing up like 5,000 copies, right? And I've never heard of these people. I don't see them on the bookstores or anything like that, but they're there making books for themselves, selling them directly to an audience, and having a great time. And they're super healthy, right? At
Yep.
least as far as I could tell, right? Like they're not stuck on like, oh, how do I get on like all the alternative covers for Batman or something like that, um, and they'll have like regular full-time jobs that they're doing and just be focused on art for art's sake. And I admire that so much. And it became one of my favorite parts of TikTok. Most of the artists that I follow, comic book artists I follow on TikTok, I don't see their work on the stands or anything, but I'm
Yeah.
watching them make it here and then sell it and stuff. And it's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. And I really, what you tapped into is whatever your happiness looks like and your success, right?
Yeah,
So
and even the things that I'm criticizing a little bit, if you're flourishing in that, the Marvel DC realm or whatever realm it is, and working on these kind of covers and books, that's best case scenario is that you're happy in that space, right? And that's what I
correct.
want to see. I think the
Correct.
only thing I'm commentary on is I see some people just kind of like that's the part that they're focusing on, you know, and then they'll get frustrated over it, you know, and
Yeah.
then complain about the industry, and then just all this negativity is coming around them and stuff.
Yeah.
And there's enough negativity out here in the world, you know.
Agreed.
Let this stuff be the sort of safe place to be happy and healthy and support each other and stuff.
You know what? I'm thinking there might be a opportunity for me to convince you to come to a con somewhere so we can do a panel just on that.
A
How to
virtual
find.
con, I'm always there, man.
There we go. I wanted to ask you about some of your work, and I think one of the pieces, or I mean, you could rattle off all your work, like Mice Templar and Victories, and some of the collaborations you've had. Was there ever a project that was incredibly like challenging that you had to work exceptionally hard to bring to life, either creatively or emotionally or in production, but from which you gained a lot from the experience that took you forward into other projects?
A really good example of that was about 2 years ago. I did a book at Dark Horse, maybe 2 years ago, a year, I don't know. It's called Project Monarch. It's kind of based on the MK Ultra stuff and Stanley Kubrick conspiracies. And at the time that I came up with the idea for this, I love the whole conspiracy theory world, right? I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but like I love the psychology around it. I love all of it, right?
Yeah.
But at the time, it was this sort of like outside the box thinking sort of thing. Then around 2016, like all that stuff started to turn on itself, and people started to take it very seriously, and it started to culminate in some bad things in the real world, right?
Yeah.
So even stuff that used to be fun, like Ancient Aliens, right? It went from this sort of like campfire thinking thing to people really believing this stuff, and then getting a kind of weird politically fascist ideology attached to it, and some weird white supremacy, and like it was just weird, and like I was like, why is this happening? So like a lot of what was just this weird fun stuff started to become really dark, and like so all these themes that I had written into the story, I had to rethink all of it, right? So I had to rewrite it several times, and this started to happen even as Victor Santos, who was drawing it, had already drawn stuff. So now I'm reworking around what he wrote, or what he drew, and then there's pages that I was drawing that I had to rebuild because of all this sort of figuring out how the world has changed around me. And production wise, I had to learn to like the budgeting for different books is different. It just sort of depends on the project and how it's structured and stuff. So I had done some coloring, but I leaped full on into coloring with this. So it was just kind of these baby steps. So I'm coloring and lettering, and like all this stuff was really, really hard. I was never sure how the book was going to turn out, because I'd rewritten it several times and I had all these weird feelings about it. And then, learning more about like conspiracy theory and like some of the hidden tropes that are in there that are anti-Semitic, like alien lizard people and stuff. There's plenty of people who think that alien lizard people are alien lizard people.
Yeah.
There are other people using that as metaphors for some really dark shit.
Yeah.
Right. So like I had to figure all that out, and it was a whole thing. It was really, really, really hard. And in the end, I think I'm proud of the project. I don't know how it comes together as the story, because it started as one thing and ended as something else. I learned tons of stuff that like now I've gone on to color and letter other stuff of my own things. And now it's become so natural to me that I kind of want to color and letter everything that I do. Because this is like, especially with the lettering, it's like this final pass on your writing. So yeah, hard to do, took years, was really frustrating. Frustrating stuff like, imagine you have 50 something pages of a book, and now you have to add a page and subtract a page. Now all those page numbers have to be changed, and you make a mistake along the way. Yep. And you're doing that, like, especially if you're me and you can't pay attention to shit, you're 4 or 5 times just relettering 50 something pages, hoping by the time that you get to the end of it, you've numbered them all correctly and stuff, like just little stuff like that. Yeah, that was a tough one. But like all hard experiences in comics are all, for me, learning experiences. And I don't just say that because it sounds good, but like they really are. And you learn how to do things better. So that was one that was like super challenging and tough.
That's freaking cool. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I hear that a lot. I actually had a creative who told me on his first book, he's a complete indie dude, and a good friend of mine, and he said he said he did exactly that. He was taking out pages and moving, and then realized like this person, like he had to redo the whole page and like go
Uh,
back, and it was actually an issue with the editing and storyline and where they
mhm.
move things around. It just became a big issue.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
that can
that's
be
hard.
neurotic. Like you sit there and be like, oh my gosh. And literally that's with every medium, but with comic books, people like us who read them, we're
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, there's something here that doesn't
Yeah,
add
yeah,
up.
yeah. And then you put yourself through that, and it does nothing for your self-esteem. You're like, "Am I this stupid that I can't renumber 67 pages to 64 pages? Like, how did I lose count? It's not like 103,600 and something pages. It's just 60 something pages, and I can't."
Well, I
That's how I
wanted to
stay
showcase some of your
serious.
books, on here. Like, actually, let me show this real quick so folks can kind of see the amazingness in your Powers world. But also, um, these books that I mean, Powers is obvious, but the Blue Book, I wanted you to talk a little about that, and also William of Newbury, which I definitely did not know and I need to pick up. But these two books, could you elaborate a little bit more on like why people need to come out and get it now?
Yeah, so a lot of what I was talking about all kind of culminated in William of Newbury. But before I talk about William, I'll talk a bit about Blue Book. So when I was talking before about my love of all weird things like conspiracy stuff and ancient aliens, I'm a huge fan of uh, UFO culture, right? So now this doesn't mean that I believe in aliens specifically or I have a specific point of view. Although I guess I've built one after doing enough research on stuff. But I just always been interested in the whole thing. You and I are the same generation, so I bet you remember watching reruns of Leonard Nimoy's In Search of.
Yep.
Super creepy, right? Like,
Wow. Wow. You just throw me all the way back into time.
and like especially by the time we were watching it, they were in reruns, so like the film was all degraded and stuff, and like
Yep.
just creepy, and it was this whole sort of what if thing. Um, and became friends with Tinian. Well, to be honest, I became friends with Tinian by getting old. I'd been around long enough that he grew up reading my comics. So once we had one or two interactions online, and he figured out that I was interested in UFOs, he had this idea of doing this Blue Book project. So he contacted me, and he's like, "Yeah, I want to do this thing that's like UFOs, but almost a journalistic approach, like not retelling it, so that we can sort of pump up certain aspects and like throw in our own sort of fiction of it and stuff like just the history of it." Um, and we were just so locked in, like we knew immediately it was all going to be in blue tones, you know. And our first story is about Betty and Barney Hill, which is like the first sort of modern um, UFO abduction story that sort of lays the groundwork for everything that happens after that. The second volume ends up being about 1947 was when we had the first sightings of UFOs with this guy Kenneth Arnold out here in Washington, and how those stories spread through the news and stuff. So again, this is very like pretty straightforward. Like the first one feels a little bit more like a horror story because we had so much first count from Betty and Barney Hill that they could tell us these frightening things. And at the same time, James could sort of break down the facts of it. So that it's got this nice mixture of journalism and a sort of first person nonfiction fiction account of what happened to them. Um, and I love these books. They're just so fun. Um, and during this thing, where Blue Book was a huge breakthrough for me was in doing all of these tones. Before this, I've done some coloring, but it's always been on a short story here or there, right? So it's like, all right, so you struggle a little bit because you don't quite know how to color and you're just figuring it out. You get it done. But through the constant making of these pages and doing layers and doing fades and then doing glowing effects and stuff, I realized I'm basically coloring just with one color, but I'm using all these different effects, and it it made it so natural to me that when this sort of next project came up, William of Newbury, the idea of just bumping up using 4 colors instead of 2, right?
Cool.
It turned out really easy. And I had that experience on Project Monarch with the lettering and struggling through my little bit of coloring. So by the time I got to Newbury, I was like, I'm going to do all of it. And it wasn't time consuming. Like it wasn't like, oh my God, this is such a huge amount of work. It was all fun because at that point I had enough experience that I was confident in what I was doing. So it all came together, and William of Newbury was the first thing that I wrote, drew, colored, and lettered. That also came out of a Tinian project. Actually, there was a short story for a thing called True Weird, which is all these true strange accounts that are just different, right? Like Bigfoot stuff or time slip stuff or whatever. And I had always been interested in the story from the medieval time period called the Green Children, which was this account of these children who show up in a 12th century village and they're just green. And the story goes that they didn't speak English. They came from this other land, and they kind of one of them dies, one of them grows older and learns English and tells them this story that sounds like they're from another land, right? Like they're basically from the fairy realm. And this is being recorded by England's first historian, William of Newburgh, and he wrote the history of England's one of their earliest civil wars called the Anarchy, which is what you see stuff like House of Dragon is based on, where there was a succession problem. So he's writing very real history in the middle of it, also writing about, oh, this person returned from the dead, because he's a Christian medieval monk. This was just a thing, right?
It's normal.
Yeah. So the more research I did into this guy, the more stories I found. And I was like, oh, I'll just tell his story. Like this sounds fascinating. And I wanted to return to doing some anthropomorphic stuff. So I found some reasons to do the story as an anthropomorphic story and came together. It's one of those projects that, like, as soon as I started it, it was the opposite of Project Monarch. It came to me finished, and I felt like an archaeologist where I'm just pulling away bits of it, and there it is. It was already there. Like I knew the structure of the story, who the characters needed to be. At this point, I had enough experience in one of the main things, the tools that you can use as either as an artist or storyteller or writer is the use of contrast, whether it's a visual contrast or it's a contrast in characters or a contrast in tones. So I have a priest character who is scared of everything but evil, right? So he doesn't like spiders. He doesn't like damp places. He's afraid of dogs and owls, but a demon comes up to him. He's ready to go. And then his partner is going to be, so that's a contrast, right? And then to contrast this priest character, he gets together with a thief. So this thief character is with him, right? And then the thief character is good with, she can build fires, she can negotiate with other tough people and stuff, she can fight, she's not afraid of everything except for ghosts, right? So like once you knew that, like all this stuff just came together and into this beautiful little piece. So I'm really proud of it. It's the first time in my career where I felt like everything came together, where I didn't have to go like making a caveat for something,
What I throughout this whole conversation, I've just realized, like, you're always evolving. Like you are always, like, every book that I've seen that you showcased and talked about, I just like that you're relentless on making sure that you get it right, or at least get close to it as best as possible. They're gorgeous books. So
I attribute it to not fully knowing what I'm doing, but trying. So there's this saying that I have, like, comics feels like a puzzle. I'm almost always getting. Like, I got really close this time. It's like a Rubik's Cube where, like, there's 3. Like, oh, I almost got all the cubes, right? And that's what makes it fun and compelling, is this need and want to do it again. And that's why I don't get bored with it. And I work on too many things because I get too excited, and I just want to do this and I want to do that, and
that's so cool.
And it just keeps me motivated and fresh. I feel like the second I think I know what I'm doing, that'll scare me. Like once I have a process, once I know exactly how I'm going to do every single page for every single thing, and maybe that's comforting for other artists, but for me, it means like, crap, I painted myself into a corner.
Yeah, I feel like you are you might be a perfectionist, but wanting more. Like you're always trying to make sure that the next thing is the next level. But
luckily, I don't believe in perfection. Like my advice to other people is don't be a perfectionist, right? Because perfection, there's no such thing,
yeah,
right? And you'll just drive yourself crazy. You just do the best that you can,
wow.
And sometimes look, some of my work, like I'll do some pages and like they're not at all hacked out, but like I know I'm just doing what I can at the time. Like this is the most amount of energy that I have. This is the most amount of, well, it usually comes down to energy because I'm old, right? Like it's mental energy or physical energy or whatever. Like you do the best that you can every single time. But if you backtrack constantly trying to fix everything and to make it perfect, it'll also
never get done.
life out of things,
Yeah, I like to use the word seasoned for us in our generation.
I'm trying to do that more. I'm trying to do that more.
Just use seasoned. I think people will just tell them you taste. You have a different taste, and you're, you're the bridger to all generations. That's what I always tell them. Back in the day, Gen Xers were, the folks who were like anti-government, anti-establishment. And I think we still are. But I also think I always remind folks that we're the ones that built everything that everyone is now enjoying. And we're the bridge builders.
It's so crazy when you look back. Like we won't get too sidetracked into this. But how much things are like flip-flopped. Like we used to be the performative agitators.
Yep.
Right, they used to be the church lady from Saturday Night Live.
Yep.
And like, anyway.
Well, I have a couple of things I wanted to ask you. Is there anything that you would love to to talk to us about that you can, about any projects that you're currently working on, or any dream projects that you might want folks to say, hey, if you want it, I can I can do it.
Well, if you like Powers, at Dark Horse we've been reprinting the collections and stuff. Keep your eye out in that space. We want to keep Powers alive in one way or the other, so we've got ideas for stuff. Blue Book, there's more Blue Book. I'm working on the next thing right now. So there's more of that. I'm going to do more of William of Newbury. What else can I talk about? And I'm working on just a bunch of other stuff. I'm working on a graphic novel with Douglas Rushkoff. He's a journalist and a filmmaker. We worked together before on a book called Aleister and Adolf, about Aleister Crowley's time working against the Nazis with magicians and weird stuff. And it's all historic. It's weird. It was a Dark Horse book.
That's cool.
Yeah. So we're working on stuff together, and I've just got stuff. I'm just doing stuff. I've got other projects in the works, pitching around and stuff. There's always a Kickstarter that I'm getting ready to do. So we just have a very complicated schedule that my wife puts together. We work on it like every morning because I constantly have to sort of readjust.
That's so cool.
How many pages did you get done this week? How many layouts are there and stuff. And yeah.
But if you had any advice for anybody, and I know you get this question a lot, but what are some things that you definitely would, push folks to invest in themselves, and also to, get themselves prepared for the next phase in their lives, whether it's in comic books or in media?
Yeah, focus on the things you want. Try and weed out the things that you don't want or need. Need and want are two different things. You figure those things out, right? Just go forward without being afraid. Like if you're always constantly asking yourself, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And then that stops you from doing stuff. Whether you're creating comics or anything else that you want to do in life, you'll never get to do those things. And we've all been through hard things, right? So what's the worst thing that can happen?
Well, you heard it from the master, the maestro, the icon, Michael. Thank you so much. This has been a great, not just interview, but also it's been life-changing for me. So I just want to let you know that's pretty dope.
It was a great hangout, man. I'll be happy to do this again. You know,
Yeah.
we'll have some new news soonish, so I can always come back and talk about that stuff or your convention stuff. And
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
you're giving me ideas about the next virtual con, Gen X Con. Michael, thank you so much. On behalf of the community, we are better for not only for us to spend time with you, but also to really gain some insight about what you're doing and how to support you. So if anybody wants to support you, what should they do? What are your socials? That's what I should say. Not that you're not hard to find.
Because my last name and I was an early adapter, pretty easy to find. Here on YouTube, just look up Oeming. You'll find my channel. I do most of my interactions are either on Blue Sky, also at Oeming, Instagram, also at Oeming, and same thing with Twitter, with TikTok. You can find me there as well. And I have a newsletter which you can find in any sort of the links that are in the bio kind of thing. And the newsletter only goes out like once every 2 months, so it's not one of these things where you're just inundated with my ego.
So it won't be every 3 days, 4 days, all that good stuff. Awesome. Well, I want to thank you. I want to thank your wife also for also being such a great part of this experience as well. And for those of you who don't know what technical difficulties look like and people who can help you, I wish we had outtakes. We didn't have outtakes then, so
oh my gosh,
unfortunately.
So funny.
But from us Gen Xers and all the generations, I don't want to just exclude them, but from the Gen X show, we just want to say thank you so much for your support of this channel, but also for the future. So we look forward to connecting again.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much. Yeah, I look forward to it, dude.
Awesome. Again, another round of applause for the man, the myth, the legend, Michael Avon Oeming. Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy.
And we are out. Peace out from the Gen X world. And we will catch you at the next show.